That was exciting, wasn't it?
Thanks for coming. See you down at the TLC. No, we're...
Fill out your evals.
Yeah, fill out your evals. All right. So I think it's probably good to go. We got a minute before, but we'll go ahead and start. Hopefully you're all here for upgrading SharePoint from SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2010. We all good on that? All right. Maestro with the slide deck.
Jump right in then. All right, so quickly, who am I? My name is Shane Young. I am
I paid extra for his mic not to work. Money well spent.
It says my mic is, woo. There I am. Hello. Hi. How are you? Have a good day? No. All right. Try it again. So my name is Shane Young. I am a SharePoint server MVP. Been one for, I don't know, 1,000 years or something at this point. I do consulting, training, writing, learning arithmetic. Not quite there yet. But so really, I have, Todd and I have been doing SharePoint 2010 for about a year and a half now. A lot of the internal Microsoft stuff on upgrades we actually wrote or helped create and deliver. So we've been doing a lot of upgrades for the last year and a half. So a lot of fun stuff there. There's my email address, my Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all those fun things. So if you're a social kind of person, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm the owner of SharePoint 911, so that really just means I get to tell this guy what to do every day. So
I don't do it, but he gets to tell me. So this is me. I'm Todd Clint. I am a WSS MVP. I expect soon to be getting the mail that I am a Foundation MVP. I imagine they're going to change that. Do the same kind of things that this guy does, obviously speaking, writing, consulting. Former right fielder for the Montreal Expos, apparently. So I've got a blog out there where I chronicle my daily and weekly fights with SharePoint. I also do a mostly weekly SharePoint netcast where I do a little audio video thing. I do it live Monday nights at 8:30 Central. Do it on Stickcam so you can watch. There's a chat room you can heckle. And then I've got them on my blog you can download. So we got a couple of people in the room that listen to it. My mom, she listens to it. But it's just a good place. I get emails with questions, tweets with questions, stuff that I don't want to take the time to blog, but I want to talk about, so feel free to jump in there. Links are on the blog. Company website, my email address, and I'm also on Twitter at /ToddClint.
all right, so that's all the fun stuff. A little bit more on Todd and I real quick would be the fact that we do all these things as infrastructure guys, right? Before SharePoint, we were both, MCSE nerds doing our AD and Exchange and SQL and firewalls. And
Yep.
so that's kind of our background. So we have, that's our perspective in SharePoint. It kind of makes us unique because there's not a lot of IT guys. Most of them are developers.
Yeah, developers.
All right. Oh, you're a token developer? We're going to, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Because we always need a developer in the audience to make fun of. Your lucky day, sir. Congratulations.
Okay, so starting out here, real quick, let's just jump through the supported scenarios. So we're going to look at the in-place upgrade, right? That's literally going to be the old traditional next, finish. Magically, it's all done. Woo!
Yep.
There is also going to be the database attach upgrade. And so that's going to be let's build a brand new 2010 farm over here. Let's grab just our content databases from 2007, bring them over to the 2010 environment, stick them in, use PowerShell, mount them up. The upgrade happens right there on the fly.
Yep.
That is the database attach upgrade is a content-focused one, whereas in-place is going to try and bring everything. And we're going to go through the methods.
Yep. This is just kind of an overview slide, so we'll hit them all in greater detail.
Now, then there's an option if you did the single-click install, a.k.a. basic install, a.k.a. the devil.
Anybody in this room do a basic install of SharePoint 2007 and have it still running?
Don't raise your hand.
If you raise your hand, it's right to the door. Okay.
So there's some special stuff for that, but no one cares.
Yeah, there's a couple of really fringe cases that's different, but we're not going to talk about that much.
Now, how many of you upgraded from 2003 to 2007 or V2 to V3?
You folks?
Yeah, about a third of you.
Yeah, so the folks that did upgrades from 2003 to 2007, you are really going to love the upgrade to 2010. Because all of the things that we hated and we cussed and kicked our dogs because of in the upgrade to 2007, mostly all fixed in the upgrade to 2010. Those of you that have never done an upgrade from 2003, you're not going to be as nearly in an amber. But the rest of you, it's going to be awesome. You're really going to be excited.
You really will. So with that, though, what is the one upgrade method we didn't just talk about?
The gradual. So for those of you, the third of you in the room that did upgrades from 2003 to 2007, how many of you did the in-place upgrade? One of you. That's one more than we used.
Three.
Two.
Wow.
That never worked. How many of you did a database attach? So that was pretty, okay. How many of you did gradual, the side-by-side?
Yeah.
So as SharePoint consultants, that's what we did 99% of the time. We had good back out. You know, if things went wrong, we could back out, things like that. So what did we find out in the upgrade to SharePoint 2010? They took out the method that we used 99% of the time. So we had a tough time with that. We had, when we first heard about that from one of the guys in the product team, we might have reacted a little harshly. I don't know that Shane should have necessarily thrown the chair at him. Swing it maybe, but not throw it. But after we played with the product for a little bit, it's not a big deal. We're going to find out that that's not the problem we thought it was going to be. So that's one of the unsupported things. Another unsupported thing, I got a lot of questions last night at the SharePoint TLC booth. I've got SharePoint 2003 or something like that. How can I upgrade that to 2010? Out of the box, you can't. The only supported upgrades for everything we talk about for the rest of this session assumes that you have SharePoint 2007, Service Pack 2, or later. Nothing out of the box works pre-Service Pack 2, so that's not supported. So you can't do a database attach, you can't do a direct thing, and then the side-by-side, also known as the gradual. Those are the other two unsupported things.
All right, so we're good? Everybody's got our methods, the good, the bad, the ugly? Okay, so really the in-place, like we said, it's the next finish method. The two big changes for the in-place upgrade. One is that it's restartable, right? The reason Todd and I hated in-place upgrades so much before was if you did an in-place upgrade and, you know, it hiccuped or somebody looked at the server funny, it would die in the middle, and what was the only option to get back was format your server, reinstall, recover from backups. In-place was like a one-shot, you know, all or nothing type of deal.
It was kind of a 1-2 punch. If anything failed, you had to start from scratch. You had to reformat everything. And almost anything would make it fail. So it was just a very fragile upgrade, and then if anything happened, somebody left a window open and a breeze came through the room, the install would fail, the upgrade would fail, and you'd have to get tapes out and all that. It was really bad. So those of you, the three of you that pulled it off, my hat's to you. My hat's off to you. That's good stuff.
So the other thing that they've done is they've tried to be a lot smarter, and we'll talk about this more as we go on, but about common blocking type timeouts, right? So for example, a reason an in-place upgrade might have failed was if you had a site collection that was locked, right? Because you've got, you know, either it was locked because you went into the UI and locked it, or if it was over its quota. Any of that type of stuff could break the upgrade process. Well, if a site collection was over its quota, how did you upgrade it?
You turned the music loud next door.
Wow, that's loud. What would you do? You'd go in, you'd be like, all right, let me take the quota off of it, upgrade it, and put the quota back, right? That's what you did. So what they said was, hey, this time, let's just do that for people. So when SharePoint 2010 hits things like that, it says, oh, let me just fix that for you, get the upgrade done, and then go back.
Yep. So I think we all had a list of things that stunk in the SharePoint 2003 to 2007 upgrade, and it was a fairly long list. And it felt to us like the folks at Microsoft took that list and kind of scratched out the top and wrote things to fix in the 2007 to 2010 upgrade, because all those things. So the timeouts, that was another thing. There were arbitrary timeouts in the in-place upgrade to 2007 for no good reason. So if you had a document library that had a lot of documents in it or big documents and it was taking SQL a long time to churn through it, it would just fail for no reason because it took too long and it would just, you know. So those kind of things have been removed. So it's a much better experience.
All right, so the upside of the in-place upgrade, right, is, or not the upside, but
the upside is all of your stuff is gone.
No. While you do the in-place upgrade, it's important to understand that your entire farm is down, right? What we're going to do is we're going to say, start the in-place upgrade, we're going to take everything offline, upgrade everything, and when everything's successfully done, we're going to bring it all back online at the end. So for a lot of you, in-place upgrade is a challenge because you might not be able to afford 3 days of downtime when in-place upgrade runs, for example.
Yep. And that's an important thing. This is what we call foreshadowing. With this upgrade method, all of your stuff is offline all the entire time. Keep that in mind.
So the other challenge we've found a lot with people with in-place upgrades is, you know, a lot of you have 32-bit farms, right? Whether your SharePoint servers are 32-bit or your SQL boxes are 32-bit or maybe you're still running SQL 2000, God forbid. But those type of things can get in your way, right? So in order to do an in-place upgrade, you still got to meet all the hardware requirements. You got to be running on 64-bit Windows 2008 or 2008 R2, that type of stuff. So that's another challenge with doing in-place upgrades for a lot of people.
Yep. So are a lot of you in that spot? Do you have 32-bit SharePoint farms now that you're going to want to upgrade? Do we have? Okay.
Yep.
So when we do like the class about this, it sounds pretty scary to tell you that you have to move everything to 64-bit. In all honesty, it's not. We've got a white paper out there on it. From a high level, the fix for this is really to just remove your 32-bit server from your farm, uninstall SharePoint, 64-bit operating system, 64-bit SharePoint, and then re-add it to your farm. So if you think about it, your farm is a configuration database and your content databases and all that. Your farm technically lives in SQL. So you can have a SharePoint farm with no SharePoint servers. So the fix to go from 32-bit to 64-bit is just remove it, add your 64-bit server to your farm. It's not nearly as scary as it sounds. It's a pretty simple process. And that white paper outlines it.
So the upsides, though, of those in-place upgrades, right, are things like all of your customizations, all your solutions and features are already installed. Search is already configured. The BDC, Excel, it's all already configured.
Yep.
Your URLs aren't going to change, right? Everybody's just going to keep going to the same place. So if you can get an in-place upgrade to be successful, there's a lot of upside to it because a lot of the configuration stuff you don't have to redo. Right? You heard me say features and solutions are there. The upside of features and solutions is that framework is so good in 2007 today, we take it to 2010 as is. Right? So most of your 2007 features and solutions will just magically work in the 2010 space.
Yep.
Not all of them, but most of them.
Yep. So for this gentleman here who's a developer, they've moved a lot of things around. DLLs have been renamed and things like that. But to keep things working forward, they've put a lot of stub DLLs in. So if the DLL name is changed, if your 2007 code tries to call a DLL that doesn't exist in 2010, 2010's smart enough to forward that call to the correct DLL, things like that. So they've gone out of their way to make sure that upgrade. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't upgrade your features and solutions. You should go out. There's a lot of vendors down at the expo hall. They've got 2010 versions of their product. You're going to want to get the new ones out there, as soon as you can. But the old ones will still work to get you through the upgrade.
So the other cool thing there is, so today in your 2007 features, right, we actually now, I believe, post-Service Pack 2 support upgrade tags inside those features. So the idea is that a developer creates one feature. He says, oh, when I get to 2010, I want this feature to do things slightly different, but I want to deploy the same feature to both farms. That's no problem, because what SharePoint will do is when he puts it in 2007, it ignores the upgrade code. When he puts it in 2010, it says, oh, there's upgrade code here. Let me do things slightly different.
Yep. And there's a great article. There's the Penton Media folks that do Windows IT Pro and SQL Server Magazine and all that. They have a new SharePoint magazine, SharePoint Pro Connections. This month's version, or this month's issue, has an article about that. It's from a developer standpoint, but it's all about this feature code, or this upgrade code inside of features. So if you're a developer, go down there, grab a free copy of that. It'll learn you up.
Todd would also like you to know that his name is on the cover of that magazine. So
I wasn't going to mention it, but
he's over here kicking me under the table. So another thing that you guys need to embrace, right? You guys have all heard of service applications at this point, right? Hopefully. If not, there's a talk later today on service applications.
Yeah, Joel Olson's doing a talk on service applications later today.
But so what we're going to do is we're going to take, in a nutshell, our SSPs, our shared service providers. And the downside of an SSP today is it's a unit, right? When you create an SSP, you get search, profiles, audiences, my sites, all as one unit. If search goes corrupt, what's the fix? Create a new SSP, and then you have to manually reconfigure search, but you have to do profiles, audiences, and my sites, right? Because you can only be associated with one SSP at a time. When we jump to 2010, what are we going to see? We're going to see that your SSPs get broken up into individual service applications. So search is a service application. Profiles are a service application. Excel is a service app. And we can associate our web applications with these service applications. Now, when you do an in-place upgrade, though, what's going to happen to you is every SSP that you have is automatically going to be exploded out into all of the required service applications to replicate that functionality. And so imagine if you had 3 or 4 SSPs here, right? So this screenshot is showing you one SSP exploded out into, what is that, about 8 different service applications? 7?
7.
So if you had 3 SSPs, now you've got 21 service applications. And SharePoint will go ahead and wire those up for you. So it'll say shared services 1 user profile is associated with all of the web applications that are associated with that SSP in the past. But now all of a sudden you've got 3 copies of search. Do you really want 3 different search engines? Do you really want 3 different profile engines? Probably not. So this is one of those points in time when you jump off and say, hey, now that I'm done with the upgrade and I've got all this garbage, let's rearrange a little bit, reorganize everything to use one search service application, and then delete those other two. Get that overhead off my servers, right? I don't want to manage 3 if I don't have to.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about your service applications is the granular control. So maybe you had 3 SSPs because you needed 3 different BDC definitions or something like that. So with 2010, after you get everything upgraded, you can delete your excess search, but leave your extra BDCs and have the web apps consuming the correct ones. It works pretty well. That was one of the things when we were doing it in place. We're like, I wonder how this SSP thing's going to work out. Pretty impressed. It worked out pretty well, wired everything up right.
I was happy. All right, so pros and cons, I think we hit all of those.
Yep. So the big thing is we're doing a lot of consulting now for places where people are very excited to get to SharePoint 2010. And so we get the question a lot, should I do an in-place or should I do a database attach? And this slide and the slide for database attach sort of is how you come up with that answer. What's important to you? If you have a lot of customizations that you want to keep, if you don't have a budget for an extra server farm to do a database attach, things like that, then an in-place upgrade might be for you. But if you can't handle the downtime, things like that, then maybe it's not.
Yeah. The other thing, the challenges with in-place upgrade, I think, real quick, is the hardware requirements, right? So your hardware requirements are going to go up from V3 to V4. And the rule of thumb that Todd and I tentatively use, I think, is it's about double, right? So whatever your hardware was today, you end up with about double. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out and buy twice as many servers, right? If you're only using 20% of the capacity of the farm today, you double that to 40%, you still can use the same hardware. But if your hardware is pegged out today, you're probably going to have to, introduce another layer.
Yep.
So keep that in place, or in mind when you're doing an in-place upgrade as well. Will the hardware sustain it?
So I'll go back to that slide. So one of the cons there is the upgrade proceeds continuously. We didn't really touch it, but when you do an in-place upgrade, you have no control. So like Shane said, it's kind of next, 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 finish, and then you just have to sit back and watch it do its thing. There's not a lot of buttons to push, not a lot of knobs to turn. You just sit back and watch it. One of the things that it does is it does all of your databases in series. So it upgrades your content databases one at a time. So you've got 3, 4 servers in your farm. One of them is going to be running the upgrade and working like hell, churning through databases. The other 3 are going to be asleep. They're not going to be doing anything. So we're going to talk about that with the database attached. You can do multiples at a time. But this is one of the things, your upgrade will take you longer if you do an in-place if you've got a lot of content databases, because they all happen serially. So that's what that point is.
Okay, so our database attach. So when I think database attach, I think content, right? I'm really focused on getting my content databases. You can do the profile service database. So if you've got a lot of user profile information imported from Active Directory, maybe augmented, people were filling out the About Me's and things like that in my sites. We can bring that database over as well, but database attach is really focused on content databases.
Yep. And then if you've got anybody running project server in SharePoint 2007, your project server databases can also be brought over.
So the databases we're not going to bring you a configuration database. So that's why you have to build a fresh farm, do all that stuff again. We're not going to bring search. Right? So a lot of people get upset with this, like, well, you mean you're not going to bring my index? No, we're not going to bring anything about search. So not your crawl rules, not your content sources, not your file types, nothing about search.
Nothing.
In-place upgrade, we just told you, search just magically keeps working. So that's one of those teeter points for some people.
Yeah, and so the reason for that is not because the folks at Microsoft are bad people and want you to suffer, but search has its fingers in a lot of different places. So you've got your profile, or your search property index file. You've got your index file that sits on the file system of your web front ends. You've got your property store that sits in one database. You've got the settings in another database. And then if you've got things like best bets and all that, they're at the content database at the site collection level. So search is everywhere. If you do an in-place upgrade, search can keep track of all those places and bring those settings up. But if you're doing a database attach, that stuff's all over, and search just doesn't have a chance to find all of those little pieces. So it just doesn't try it at all. So it's just because it's a complicated mess.
Okay, so this is what we're going to look at in the demo, but I thought it was worth having on a slide. It's easier for you guys to copy down when you copy the slides and that type of stuff.
Yep.
But, so the first thing you should all be doing today is you should all have at least Service Pack 2 on your farms, your 2007. Does anybody not have Service Pack 2?
Let me see you. All right.
All right,
Everybody should be Service Pack 2.
So with Service Pack 2, we got a new thing called STS-ADM-O pre-upgrade check. And even if you're not going to do an upgrade for 3 more years, you should run this once a month.
Yep. Has anybody run this yet? Pre-upgrade check?
You.
So like Shane said, it's not just an upgrade tool. I mean, it is, but it gives you a really great report on your farm. So even if you're not going to upgrade, run it. It doesn't touch anything. It doesn't write anything to any databases. It creates 3 or 4 files on your file system, reports and stuff. But it'll list all of your web apps, all of your content databases, all of your features. A really great, just kind of auditing kind of tool. Not much to run. Lets you know if there's any problems in your farm now, even if they're not specifically upgrade problems. Data orphans, things like that, it's going to point them out for you. So run that early, run it often. It's a good addition. And if you have the October cumulative update, it kind of got a shot in the arm. This pre-upgrade check command uses some XML files for rules, and those rules got updated in October, the October cumulative update. So drop that on and run it again. You'll see some new stuff.
Absolutely. The other neat thing there is it shows you large lists.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, because a lot of us don't have a way of knowing if we have large lists in our farms today or not. This tool just says, hey, you got this list with 10,000 items.
Have you seen this list? It's this big.
So you can go beat somebody down for that.
Yeah,
right?
Users, those guys.
Okay, so once you've done that, you feel comfortable, right? When that finishes running, it should say, yes, your farm's good to upgrade, right? It's going to say, you know what, you passed all the checks, you didn't have any orphans, you didn't have any corrupt data.
No 32-bit servers.
At that point, we're going to back up the database in SQL Server. So we're going to either us or we're going to have a DBA go into SQL, do a database backup of our content database, right? Just do a little .back, hand it to us. We're going to take it to our 2010 farm. We're going to restore it in SQL Server. So, restore from SQL, boom, boom.
Right-click on databases, restore database.
Once we're done with that, then we're going to run this command called test-sp content database. What this command is going to do is it's going to look at a content database. So you're going to say, here's my 2007 database. Run this command against it. And it's going to go in and interrogate the database and say, hey, what features, what files, what functionality are you expecting? So it's just going to ask the database for a list of that information. Then, whatever 2010 web application we specify, it's going to go say, hey, I got this list. Mr. Web Application, do you support all of this? And it's going to let you match it up and say, hey, my upgrade is going to be very successful. Or, no, I'm missing a feature. That's right, I need that bamboo stuff we talked about.
Yep.
That's the type of stuff this test option is going to give you a rundown of what's going to happen before we have to modify the database in any way.
Now, here's a couple of crazy things. For those of you that did the 2003 to 2007 upgrade, there was a similar set of steps. There was a program called pre-scan. So this is one of those instances where we complained loudly and Microsoft listened. 2 problems with pre-scan. Number 1 is when you ran pre-scan, it changed your content databases. It wrote to your content databases, and that freaked a lot of people out for good reason. STS-ADM pre-upgrade check does not write to your content database. There is no way for anybody to tell whether that's been run against your content databases or not. The second step is you could not attach a 2003 database to a 2007 farm unless pre-scan had been run. That is not the case now. Since pre-upgrade check doesn't mark the content database anywhere, there's no way for their 2010 farm to know that it's been run. So that's a completely voluntary step. You don't have to run pre-upgrade check. You should. But what we're finding is we've got some customers now that want to go to 2010 that are still on 2003. So we have to do this intermediate thing where you have to run pre-scan. And if you don't have a V2 environment somewhere, you can't run pre-scan. So we're not going to get into this trouble going from 2007 to 2010. If you end up having to do a restore from tape of a 2007 content database, but all your 2007 farms are gone, you can still just jack it right into 2010. So it's going to upgrade. The other thing is that test SP content database, you also don't have to run that. If you forget, because when we were doing our demos for this, we actually forgot that. You can not, it also doesn't change your databases at all. So these are great steps to run. You absolutely should do it every time, but if you forget, it's no big deal. It's going to go either way.
All right, then that brings us to the very end, right?
Yep. So the next step is mount it. So you've checked it on the 2007 side. You've got a list of things to do. You've backed it up. You've moved it over. You've tested it on the 2010 side against its destination. Everything looks good or doesn't look good. It doesn't matter. The last step is to mount it up. So this is like the old STS-ADM command, add content DB. We're going to take that content database and we're going to mount it up into a SharePoint 2010 web app. Much like SharePoint 2007, when you mount a content database, if it's an older version, SharePoint just automatically upgrades it for free, just does that for you. So that's what that command does. Not to be confused, and we're going to talk about this later, there is an upgrade SP content database commandlet. That is not what you do to upgrade an SP content database, sadly. Just mounting it's all you need to do, and it will get upgraded automatically.
Does that make sense? So ignore the upgrade command for now. It's mount.
Yeah, we'll cover that later.
And mount is really just the equivalent of STS-ADM-O add content DB.
So here's that second slide. When it comes to the question, should we do an in-place or should we do a database attach? Here's the second slide that's got the pros and the cons. So the pro, I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but.
Can you guys hear that?
The music,
okay.
All right, cool.
So I'm not dancing for no reason.
Yeah, it's not in your head, Shane, it really, the rest of it. So one of the pros is you can do multiple content databases at the same time. So you've got a SharePoint 2010 farm now, it's got 4 or 5 servers in it, and you've got 10 content databases from your 2007 side. Run pre-upgrade check on your farm in 2007, bring all those databases over, run the test against all 10. Now on these boxes, you can run the mount command on multiple boxes at the same time. Anybody tried that in 2007? If you run STS-ADM add content DB on 2 boxes at the same time, what happens? The second one gives you a big thumbs down. It won't let you do it. In 2010, not only can you have multiple machines adding content databases at the same time, let's say you're clever and you open up 2 PowerShell windows on the same box, you can actually do 2 databases on the same box. So if you've got, maybe your content databases are in separate SQL servers, or you've got a really beefy SharePoint box, you can upgrade multiple databases at the same time. So this is one of the pros against the in-place that does them all serially. Now with the database attach method, we can do a parallel as long as we've got a decent SQL backend and SharePoint front end to do it.
So one of the things there you see is that customizations must be transferred manually as both the pro and the con. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is we're finding this is, going from 2007 to 2010 is a good time to evaluate some of these customizations. Did the business have you roll this customization out because it was Tuesday and they were bored?
Yeah, is that blink tag at the top of all your pages really a good idea anymore? Is that
the blink tag, nice. But it's a chance for you to evaluate what you're doing with customizations. There's a tenfold new functionality in SharePoint 2010. Can you now do that customization out of the box for free? So being able to evaluate all these solutions and determine which ones get installed on this brand new 2010 farm, to me, is as much of a pro as it is a con. So.
Yep. And the middle pro there is combine multiple farms. So SharePoint 2007 had some sizing limitations. You could only index 50 million items, things like that. So we've seen some companies that, to get past some of these scale issues, had multiple SharePoint 2007 farms. With the database attach method, if SharePoint 2010 fixes those issues, you can have a SharePoint 2010 farm, but start pulling databases in from other farms, into separate web apps, obviously. But you can bring that all into one central farm now, so you have that ability to bring it all together, get it into one centralized spot, get some of those SharePoint servers out from under people's desks, things like that.
I think we now get to do that crazy thing where I get to demo.
You do?
Woohoo! All right.
If anybody needs to get up and go to the bathroom or something, now's the time.
That would be the moment. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is my 2010 farm, right? I built it from scratch. This is literally just a VM running on my dinky little laptop here. So I'm going to go into SQL Server Management Studio. Hopefully yours is easier to read than mine is. So I'm going to databases, and I'm going to say restore. And so on restore, I'm going to say, all right, from device, hit browse, file, add. And if we scroll way up here into my backups folder, see I got a whole bunch of different database backups here. And so the one I'm going to do first is WSS_content_, we'll just do a 2007 one here. Okay, so
that one might already still be in SQL.
Yeah, it's all right. SQL doesn't care.
All right.
So there's my database. There's the backup in there. So we're going to say, all right, we're going to restore it. Now, if you go to the bottom here, this would tell you the name of the database originally. But I've already got a database named that. So we're going to name this database whatever we want. We'll call it TechEd. All right. So we're going to say, OK. So this is just a straight-up SQL Server restore. A lot of you probably got DBAs to do this for you. But there you go. So now I got the database over here, old TechEd guy. So I'm going to jump over to my SharePoint Management PowerShell, right? So that's the same as all I did was start and then SharePoint 2010 Management Shell. I made the font bright green so he felt all cool. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say test. SP content database.
Look at that tab complete. That's good stuff.
Whoever taught me that was a nice person. Yeah. So dash name. And so here we're going to do our database name, so TechEd. And then dash web application. And so this is my 2010 web app, right? And so if I don't know which one it is, I go back over to central admin real quick. Say application management. Manage my web apps. So I've got one named 2010 Server A. Very creative name.
That's good stuff.
So 2010 Server A.
Oh,
So that
my
went in
goodness.
pretty fast, actually. Good job, little VM. So here you can see that this is spitting out, trying to scroll to the top. Oh, you got all that other stuff in there, so it didn't go. Okay, so it actually out-scrolled the buffer. So what am I going to do? I'm going to rerun the command, right, because we can run it as often as we want. And I'm going to pipe the output to out-file, and we'll just call it teched.text. Voila, it's written into a text file, so then we'll just do doom teched.text. Opens it in Notepad. So what this is where it went through. Remember it said we interrogated the database, we got a list of all the features, solutions it needed in there, all the files. And these are all of the things that it said, hey, this is missing for whatever reason. Now there's a couple interesting things here. Can you guys read that okay? So we got categories, so missing a definition. Error is true, but here's the one that you care the most about. Oh, my highlighting job is very bad. Upgrade blocking equals false. So what that means is, yes, there's an error when we go to upgrade. We're going to have an error. We're going to have a failure, but it's not going to block the database from being upgraded. We're going to kind of upgrade around this problem, essentially.
Yeah, that was one of the crazy things that we were just not ready for, is a database can be kind of upgraded, mostly upgraded. So there can be errors and there can be things in a content database that SharePoint 2010 hasn't got a chance of being upgraded. It'll just upgrade around it. It'll do everything else. I'll let you get back to this later.
Yeah. So for example, maybe you've got custom site definitions, right? So you've got, in your deployment, you've got regular old team site-based site collections. You got, this custom site definition solution. And it's all in one content database. When we go to upgrade that content database, essentially all those out-of-the-box team site collections, we're just going to upgrade them. No problem. Boom, 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 boom. Get them all. The ones that have the custom site definition, we have no answer for those, right? SharePoint 2010 has no idea what to do with them. So it's going to ignore all those site collections. The content database will still be online, and all the site collections that were successfully upgraded will be displayed, but the ones that couldn't be upgraded in the same database, we'll just ignore them. You get an error message until you get them. So what do you do at that point? You say, hey, I need to deploy my custom 2010 site definition. I need a mapping file. Once you get all the pieces in place, you then go out to PowerShell, and that's when you run the upgrade one. Upgrade-SP content database. That command knows to go into a content database and say, oh, I need to upgrade these parts that haven't been upgraded, but all the site collections that were previously upgraded, we're just going to ignore those. So that's how that's going to work for you.
Yep. This error file is got a lot of really great information in it. So I know it can be overwhelming when it flies past the screen, but if you read it a little bit, it's pretty good at telling you exactly what the problem is. So right, that top one says missing site definition. So we all know what site definitions are. They're things in the file system in the templates folder. But it gives us the site ID, so every site definition has an ID. We can now go back to our 2007 farm, look in that folder, look for the site definition that's got that ID, and figure out what it is. Now we've got a name that we can put with it. We can start figuring out what feature, what solution installed that. All the information's right in there. If it's missing features, it's going to have GUIDs so that we can try to find the GUID for a feature. Go out to Bing. Rob Bogue has a blog post that has all of the common feature IDs in it. So you can take that GUID and go out and get a name for it and start trying to piece together what's going on. Great information in there, though. Don't be afraid to read through that file.
Okay, so we're not going to sit here and read through all these things.
Every line we're going to cover.
Yeah, in our fireside chat. Okay, so now that we've ran that, I read the file earlier. I know that everything in there is non-upgrade blocking. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say mount SP content database. The same thing, dash name. And it was what, TechEd, right?
Yep.
And dash web application is HTTP 2010 server A. So there you go. You can see my poor little processor in the corner getting pegged out. It's getting beat up. Now, I don't want I don't want to throw us off track here because it'll beat my machine to a halt. But if your server had enough capacity, there is nothing stopping me from saying, you know what? My server's only using 20% of the CPU to do this. I'm going to go in here, fire up a second PowerShell window, and run the mount commands
on subsequent databases. Yep.
On other databases at the same time.
Yep. Absolutely works fine.
So, Todd, what are all those numbers flying by me there?
So it's interesting. If you did anything with STS-ADM, especially in SharePoint 2007, there was never any indication that stuff was going on. Who has ever done like an STS-ADM restore on a big site collection? You hit it, and it just stares at you. You're like, oh my God, is it working? Oh, and if it's a long one, it could take days or hours. You have no idea what's going on. So we complained, and so now we've got an indicator now, percentage, down to the 100th%. We went from here to here in usefulness and 29.06, I don't know what they're doing at 29.06, but it's important because it always stops right there. Always. So yeah, let's go look. Let's see what it's doing.
So if you're not into watching command prompts, we've also given us a nice little upgrade screen here. So I can go to check upgrade status from central admin. And so here you can see real live what's going on. So you can see I've already got 56 errors. I've already got 52 warnings. What database we're
You're not very good at this.
That's so mean of you. But you can see that we're, what process, what threads, what command kicked it off.
There you go.
Down here at the bottom, we got a log file. So another big complaint that Todd and I had about upgrades.
We cried about this all the time.
Was that every upgrade you ever did, whether it was a service pack, a hotfix, or the actual upgrade, it all went into a file called upgrade.log, right? And it was all of a sudden 100 megs, and you had to dig through it to find your error messages.
Yeah, so that was the worst part. So you would do, in SharePoint 2007, you would do a bunch of upgrades because we all did graduals, so you'd do a bunch of site collections, and everything would go great. And then one site collection would go bad, you had to go to upgrade.log. That upgrade.log would be the size of a house because it would have every upgrade you'd ever done in it. So you're trying to open up this 200 or 300 meg text file in Notepad, and then trying to find your error at the bottom of that. It was horrible. So we had to do these things where we'd script up upgrades where it would rename that file before the upgrade ran, a whole bunch of kludgy stuff. So this one has every upgrade has its own file now. All very discrete files, good stuff.
So even more important than that, though...
Does it get better than that?
Gets better.
I don't believe it.
So if we jump over to the folder here, the logs, right, every upgrade has also... So there's my upgrade log file. See, right below there is the upgrade... I'm trying to expand this out. The upgrade error file. So what they've done is they've pulled all the errors from the upgrade and written those to their own special file. So these are all per run. But in this error upgrade log, you're not only going to get all the error messages in the regular upgrade log file, but you're going to get more detailed errors. So for example, if it was a .NET assembly failure, you actually get the call stack dump right there in this log file. So you don't have to go and piece it all back together. They are going to push at you with both hands all the different errors and such.
So that's pretty handy for troubleshooting, is you can just go to the error file and see nothing but all the stuff you did wrong. So it's, oh geez.
So there you go. So you can see that upgrade completed with errors. The key thing there, though, is it completed.
Completed with errors.
So let's go try our little URL out and cross our little fingers. This is the nervous part when you're demoing.
Live demos are so nerve-wracking.
Nah.
The good news is if it doesn't work, I'll just blame him. So.
And if it works,
it's all me.
Just checking.
I wrote chapter. Oh.
There you go. So now I got to go beat it down, get myself access and all that fun stuff.
But this is pretty common. So these are the kind of things that you're going to see when you do database attach upgrades. So you're going to see now, we were able to take it a little easier because we've got everything running on one box. But a pretty common thing is you take a database from one SQL server and you restore it to another SQL server. They might not have the same server roles and same logins, so then you try to attach it with SharePoint. If it's not running as the same accounts, your SharePoint 2010 account might not have access to that database that you restored from another environment. So you need to go in and make sure your permissions are set. And then once you get that worked out, and the service accounts have access, well, now maybe your users are trying to get in, but they can't get in because maybe you've moved domains or something like that. So these aren't necessarily SharePoint errors, but they're the kind of things that you're going to see. We see them all the time when we do upgrades.
Do we do? All right, so I will go give all the permissions to this little guy that needs to be done. We'll create a user called TechEd.
TechEd.
I'm very creative with my usernames.
He's good with these names. So this is, like I said, the permission stuff's pretty common. The great news is we've got the error log's going to show us that kind of stuff. The Windows event log's going to show it to us.
All right, maybe I'll do all this real quick. Why don't you jump back over to this button? That button.
All right.
Oh, actually, I'm lying. Do what? All right, well, I'll show you. I don't want you to watch me create the accounts and all that stuff, but I will show you. I'll put it all back together for you, I promise.
He can't type with an audience. His fingers get nervous.
That's the problem.
So we've talked about the two methods. We've got the two regular methods are in-place upgrade and database attach. So they've each got a couple of significant problems. The in-place upgrade, the significant problem that it has is that it takes forever if you've got a lot of content and you have no control. You can't decide. So let's say you've got a site collection that's got your My Site in it and has your resume in it. You want to get that one upgraded first, just in case things don't go so well. You want to have that resume someplace handy. But with an in-place upgrade, you have no control. You can't make sure that one comes online first, and if something fails, it's offline the entire time. So then you do the database attach. But then you got to set up this whole new farm, and you need a second set of hardware, and you got to do all your customizations and all that stuff you took all the time with. So that kind of stinks. So one of the methods that we're using a lot with customers is this hybrid approach. We're kind of taking the best of both worlds. And we learned this from doing patching on SharePoint 2007. So when you patch SharePoint 2007, if you have a large enough farm, the approach most people take is before they run the patch, they detach all their content databases. Patch SharePoint 2007, run the configuration wizard in SharePoint 2007, and make sure everything works. And then start attaching your content databases back into your farm in the order that you want them to come in, and then they will get upgraded. They'll do a little mini in-place upgrade. A lot of places do that with patching for SharePoint 2007. So we kind of brought that forward with the upgrade to 2010. So that's what this hybrid approach is going to be. So we're going to do an in-place upgrade, but before we do it, we're going to detach all of our content. So the in-place upgrade happens really fast because we're just replacing the bits. When the configuration wizard part runs and does the upgrade, it happens really fast because there's not a lot of content databases there. Then after 2010's up and going and everything's working, all of our settings are still there and all that, then we start attaching our content databases in the order that we want them upgraded and 2 or more at a time if we've got the power to handle it. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. And then what happens if, in one of those, like when you're flying, in the unlikely event of a water landing, so in the unlikely event of an in-place upgrade failure, the stuff that's really going to take a long time to recover, your content databases, they're offline. Nothing's happened to them yet. So we kind of like this hybrid approach for that kind of stuff. So here's kind of a third pros and cons slide to work with. What are the pros? Well, it's all the pros of an in-place upgrade. All your settings are preserved. Your URLs stay the same. It's your hardware. And then it's got all the pros of the database attach. You can do multiples at a time. You can also have stuff offline in read-only mode in another farm. We'll talk a little bit about that. The cons, though, very labor-intensive. There's a lot of fiddling around with things now. We've gone from the extreme. With an in-place upgrade, there's no knobs to turn or anything like that. Now this is nothing but knobs to turn. It's all very manual. Also, you might need access to your SQL servers, to move these databases around, things like that. Some organizations are too big. You've got SQL's one team, SharePoint's another team. Your SQL team might not give you that kind of access, so you've got to kind of work with those guys. If you've got an x86 box or farm, you've got complicated work there. You've got to upgrade to 30 or 64-bit, stuff like that. And then, like Shane said earlier, if you've got older hardware, if you bought your hardware when SharePoint 2007 came out in November of 2006, you've got the whole in-place upgrade con there too. Your hardware might not work. So this is so far has been, for folks that haven't just spun up a rogue 2010 farm because they're just so excited about SharePoint 2010 and done a database attached, this is the way that we've led most of our customers, is the hybrid approach. How are we doing over here? Keep going?
You're good. They're enjoying you so much I don't want to interrupt.
All right. So we've got some downtime mitigation processes. Now, one of the things that we want to get across is to set everybody's expectations appropriate when it comes to downtime. There is no such thing as no downtime upgrades. Doesn't happen. You can't read about it in storybooks. You can't see it in cartoons. There is no such thing. The Easter Bunny can't do them. No such thing as no downtime. What we do have is a few techniques that we can use to make the downtime less painful, make it smaller, things like that. So the first thing is read-only databases. Starting with Service Pack 2 in SharePoint 2007 and going forward to SharePoint 2010, SharePoint understands databases, content databases, that are read-only. So in SQL, you can go to the properties of a database, and one of your options can be set as read-only. So you can set a database as read-only. You can have, set up a separate farm or something. Set a database as read-only so that people can access a read-only copy of their content while you're upgrading the real version of their content, so that the stuff's not completely offline. Obviously, if it's read-only, they can't write to it. But this is one of those things, good expectation management will take you a long way. So when we're talking to the business folks, you tell them, okay, we're going to be upgrading SharePoint this weekend. Everything's going to be offline for 4 days. They're like, oh, 4 days, but it's the end of the quarter. We can't be offline for 4 days. This is the worst thing ever. You got to do something better than that. 4 days, You go back to your cube, play some Minesweeper, maybe watch a funny video of a cat on YouTube or something. And then you come back to me and you go, okay, I scoured the internet. And here's what I can do for you. I have found a way to make your content available to you for that 4 days, but it's going to be read-only. Is that okay? So in their head, they've gone from everything being completely gone to being only read-only. They're probably okay with that. But if you come in and you're like, all right, you guys aren't going to be able to write to your data for 4 days, suck it up, they're not going to like that. So it's, again, expectation management. But that works pretty well. And then when your upgrade's done and everything's tested, you point them over to the farm that's read-write. That's one of the ways. We talked about parallel content database upgrades. So we can have multiple databases being upgraded at the same time in a farm. But as we all know, SharePoint content databases are completely portable. You can move a content database from one farm to another. So another technique that you can do if you've got machines, just sitting around, is you can have SharePoint 2010 installed on them, ready to go. When you're doing your in-place upgrade, if you're doing a hybrid approach or whatever, you can take those content databases and upgrade them on other farms while your farm is upgrading. And then when the farm is upgraded without all the content databases, you can take these content databases that have been upgraded in tandem on these other farms, attach them to your production farm, and they're going to attach right away because there's no upgrade happening now. So you have that option. The third option we have is one called Content Database with AAM Redirect, also known as the approach that has the longest name in SharePoint. So what if you have a lot of content, terabytes and terabytes and petabytes and exabytes and all that, and none of these approaches are going to get you online quick enough. You can't do an in-place upgrade because it would take you July, August, and part of September. You can't do the database attach because it will take you July and part of August because you've got all these databases, lots and lots of content. So there is an option called Content Database with AAM Redirect. Do we have the illustration? Okay. All right. So what we're doing here is we've got two separate farms. We've got a 2007 farm on your left and a 2010 farm on your right. So this is sort of like the gradual upgrade with 2003 to 2007. But essentially, this lets us stage our upgrade. So when we create a web app in 2010, we have to do it from STS-ADM, that bad word. And when we do it, we say, here's the zone URL, here's the redirect URL. And what we've done is on our 2007 farm, which everybody used to get to as HTTP WSS, we've set an alternate access mapping for WSS old. And so essentially what we've told the SharePoint 2010 farm is when an end user request comes in for a site collection that you don't have, it's probably still on the old farm. So redirect that request to your 2007 farm. So what this does is this lets you stage your content database upgrades so that you can do it over the course of days or weeks without the content ever being offline. So it's kind of a complicated thing. So I've sat down with a pencil and paper and crayons and created this beautiful animation. Really, I stole it from Sean Livingston at Microsoft, but we can pretend that I made it. So the blue one is SharePoint 2010. The maroon one is SharePoint 2007. So in the first stage, an end user request comes in. SharePoint 2010 looks in the configuration database, says, I don't know who that site collection is, sends a 302 redirect back to the browser for the SharePoint 2007 URL, the new one, the new one that we've come up with. and the web page loads. Now, a couple of things. If there was a slide before this slide, the SharePoint 2007 farm would be WSS old, or WSS, excuse me. That's what users are going for. When you come up with your redirect URL, be very careful. The URL, because this is a 302 redirect, so they're going to see it in their browser when they get redirected. It has to be something that's obvious to them that is the old version. So here's a story I love talking about from Microsoft, is when they went from 2003 to 2007, they did a gradual upgrade, which was a very similar thing. You had to come up with a new URL for your V2. So they had like HTTP SharePoint. And then when they did the gradual upgrade, they called their old one HTTP SharePoint V2, because they were going from V2 to V3. So as they're gradually upgrading these, people were getting redirected to the old site at HTTP V2, and they're like, it's V2, it must be the new version. So they started bookmarking all these new URLs, which were really the old URLs, so that as MSIT was upgrading SharePoint, people were still going to the old URLs because they'd seen that V2, and they're like, oh, it's the second version, not realizing that the new version was the third version. So that's why we suggest WSS old, so that your end users see that and it's obvious to them that something's happened. So your user's done a request, it's gone to SharePoint 2010. SharePoint 2010 said, I've got no idea who this is. Go to 2007. So now we do a database attach. And it really is just that easy. It just slides over.
Does the color really change?
The color really changes. If you watch SQL, absolutely. Stare at your drives. So now we've done just a regular mount. So that content database has been attached to the SharePoint 2010 farm. SharePoint 2010 knows about the content databases that are in it. Now Mildred in accounting comes in, tries to go to her site collection. They check the config database. We have a winner. It's in the 2010 content database. Mildred gets her spreadsheet back and everybody's happy. Now, the big takeaway from this slide is that only works at the site collection level. So if Mildred tries to go, she mistypes a web. If the web exists in 2010, she gets a 404. It only checks the site collection. It checks the site maps table in the config database to see if that site collection exists. So, and then when that's done, take 2007 one offline.
You also talked about it was a blind redirect, right? We don't check to make sure it's in the V2 farm or the V3 farm.
Yep.
We just shove it across.
Shucks it off. Yep.
All right.
Are you good to go there?
Yeah, but let's just finish. We'll get,
Okay.
when we get to the next demo point. So
Okay.
This is the last piece here.
So this is another, it's not really downtime mitigation, but it's one of those things that takes away one of the blockings for upgrade. So SharePoint 2010 has this idea of visual upgrade. And this is the ability for us to separate the back-end upgrade from the front-end upgrade. And by front-end, we're talking about what the end user sees, the visuals of the site, things like that. So with visual upgrade, it's the ability for SharePoint 2010 to render content using the SharePoint 2007 master pages and CSS and all that. So you can have a site in SharePoint 2010 that looks exactly like SharePoint 2007. Essentially, when the page is being rendered, there's a fork in the road that says render as SharePoint 2010, render as SharePoint 2007, and we can toggle that back and forth. So that gives us some flexibility if we haven't got our end users trained yet on SharePoint 2000 or 2010, if we don't have all of our themes upgraded to SharePoint 2010, if we don't have master pages upgraded yet to SharePoint 2010, because those don't upgrade. Themes and master pages do not upgrade from SharePoint 2007 to 2010. So let's say we haven't got that all worked out yet, but we want to do the back-end upgrade. With visual upgrade, we can upgrade the back-end, everything to SharePoint 2010, but using visual upgrade, tell SharePoint to render it as 2007. So it looks the same to the end users, uses all those other assets until we get them into 2010. We have three modes for that. We can say SharePoint 2007 mode. We can say we want to look at the 2010 mode, but give us the option to go back to 2007. Or we can say 2010 all the way and be done with it.
And the cool thing there is that's at a per web level. So the subsite. So each subsite, you can one at a time, if you really wanted to, say, oh, this subsite is 2010, this subsite is V3, and move back and forth that way. So it's very, very granular.
Yep. And the site collection administrator and higher has permission to change that, so it's not necessarily something that you guys in IT need to handle if you don't want to. Talk to your site collection administrators, tell them to manage it. The other great thing is this can be changed in PowerShell. So you can tell them, okay, we're upgrading to SharePoint 2010 July 1st. And you guys have till September 1st to get everybody over to the 2010 interface. September 2nd, I'm going to run a really cool PowerShell script that I found on the web, and everybody gets 2010. It's just going to walk through every web in the farm, turn them to 2010. So you've got a lot of flexibility there.
So, and it's like Todd just said, right? The focus here is that way it lets us separate the IT project, us coming in doing the back end versus the front end people, and when it all happens. So this is, once again, this is the PowerShell. We're going to demo this PowerShell, so we won't get into it here, but this is something for you to steal from the slides pretty easily, so you can reuse it if you need.
Yep, this is also on my blog. If you want to go out there, I've got this all.
It's on my blog.
It's on my blog. Blogs are big these days.
Yeah, you're popular on the internet, right?
Yep.
That's what you're trying to tell me? Okay, so before we jump in too far, I will... So here you can see it is now rendering.
When you last saw this show, the web page did not render.
So when I went to the right place, here was the problem. Was the site collection that we upgraded was from my SharePoint 911 production farm back in Cincinnati, right? And this is a Contoso machine. That was a SharePoint 911 farm. So I had to go in here, and there's my site collection administrators. It's Laura and myself. Those aren't valid accounts. That's why we kept getting that access denied. So I went in here. I changed this to be, I can show you, but it was, I went in and said, OK, let's go into site collection administrators. And now it's Contoso/administrator in TechEd. So this was a problem because I was jumping from one Active Directory domain to another. That's the reason we had this issue.
Yep.
OK, so... So if you look here, oh, not there.
Yeah, look there.
So there you go. We upgraded. This is my 2010 farm.
Ta-da! Pretty impressive, huh? Your users are going to love 2010.
And so if we go in here, if we go like site actions, we go to our friend's site settings, modify all of them. This is 2007.
You guys have sat through an hour of our shenanigans to get this.
So what we did with this site collections, we went in and I created a different, web using the different templates. So for example, there's the team site one right here. All right, so this is a 2007 team site. Well, so we want to try out the 2010 visuals, right? So what we're going to do, because we are a owner of this web and then some, is we're going to go in here and we're going to say visual upgrade. And now we get to pick, essentially use 2007, use 2010, but preview or commit. So we're going to say, let's do the preview thing. Click OK.
You don't say.
What'd you break, Willis?
So that was an error saying it couldn't access the master page for V4.
All right, let's go try a different web.
Sweet, live demos are awesome. It's a good time to give away a book now.
No, they don't need to be bribed yet. It's going to get much worse.
Yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better, folks.
All right, let's try this one. Fair enough. All right.
So we got to. Not trying to cop out, because we got a bunch of some other stuff to cover, but now we would go into the ULS logs. We've got a correlation ID there. Now's a good time to talk about correlation IDs. Can you, highlight that? Okay. SharePoint 2010 introduces this thing that has nothing to do with upgrade called a correlation ID. And what the correlation ID lets you do is correlate the error that an end user sees with entries in your ULS log. Who here has tried to use the ULS logs to find out, to figure out what an error is and just had no luck figuring out, okay, those things are a mess. So with the correlation ID, every single end user transaction, every conversation between me and my farm is given a correlation ID. So when we get errors like this, we can go into our ULS logs, search for that correlation ID, and every error or every entry in that ULS log that pertains to this conversation will have that correlation ID. So we can jump immediately to where the problem's at. And if you use something like the ULS viewer on MSDN, or I use Excel because I'm not very smart, but you can now start filtering by these and see only the stuff that you need to see. So unfortunately, because we've got more stuff to talk about, we're not going to be able to show you how to troubleshoot this. But that's what we would do next when we were doing an upgrade.
I'll try and fix it real quick.
Okay.
They don't like listening to me talk anyway.
What do we got? Okay, so one of the things, when we talked to Sean Livingston at Microsoft, he's the PM for Upgrade, he said that one of the mantras that they had when they were designing this whole upgrade feel, this whole scenario, was to do no harm. And the visual upgrade is a good example of that. So when you do an upgrade, any of the ways that you do an upgrade, an in-place upgrade, a database attach, whatever, Unless you tell SharePoint otherwise, it will preserve the 2007 interface for you because that's doing less harm. There's less chance for people to get freaked out if they see the 2007 interface than the 2010, other than the fact that you do the upgrade and you go to the web page and it's still 2007. So we've got this mantra of do no harm. That's one of the improvements that they've talked about. So that's anytime there's a fork in the road, we can do harm or we cannot do harm, they pick the do no harm. So they've improved a lot of the upgrade things. For the in-place upgrade or for the database attach, they've removed a lot of the sticking points, the blocking things, the timeouts, that kind of stuff, a lot of the pain points that we had going to 2007. The predictability and the reliability, it just doesn't fail as much. It's easier to understand when things are going to be happening. The diagnostic ability and the logging is tremendous in this version. So these were the things we talked about where we have separate upgrade logs for every upgrade that runs. And then we have an error-only log that only has errors in it. So we've got those. It makes finding problems easier. The end-user experience is much better. We've got this visual upgrade. A couple of things about the visual upgrade when Shane gets that up and working again. The thing that kills me the most on the interface from SharePoint 2007 to 2010 is where site settings is. So in 2007, site settings is over here, and in 2010, it's over here. So when I'm doing the visual upgrade thing, I go over here, I pick at the very bottom, visual upgrade, tell it 2010, look at the page, want to set it back to 2007, look around over here for something to click, there's nothing here, go over here to site actions, go down to the middle where visual upgrade is. So some of that stuff's a little tricky, but the interface is better. Moving site actions over to this side actually makes better sense because the left part of your screen is more stable than the right part. So the end user experience is better. The admin experience is better unless you're doing it in front of a room full of 200 or 300 people, then the upgrade doesn't go so well. But you've got better controls over things. You can do multiple things at once. Better logging. You've got that web page that Shane showed you where you've got your upgrade logging page where you can see what's going on, your percentage and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of great improvements. And like for those of you that did upgrades to 2007, this is some good stuff, isn't it? I mean, there's some really good improvements here. Logging, we talked about that. Okay, so the other thing is the upgrade log has the same columns now. Before, different parts of so many different things went into that same log that it didn't always line up. Now you can just pull that log right into Excel. That's what I use. Pull it into Excel, go to the data tab, turn on filtering, sorting. So it's very easy to report, automate, things like that. Resume capability. So that was one of the things. In SharePoint 2003 to 2007, if there was something wrong when you started the in-place upgrade, you were done. So one of the errors that I had when I was writing the upgrade chapter for the book was the betas of SharePoint 2010 didn't check SQL. So there's some specific things that you need for SQL for SharePoint 2010. It needs to be 64-bit, and then if you're SQL 2005, it's got to be Service Pack 3, CU 47, subset 4, paragraph A, whatever. All those. Well, I didn't have all those in place on my VM, but the betas didn't check that. RTM checks that. So I started an upgrade, not realizing that my SQL instance wasn't good enough, and then got, the upgrade started and went, I can't use this SQL instance, and it just bombed out on me. Had that happened from 2003 to 2007, I'd have had to go back to tape. So you can resume. You can resume the databases. We saw that, where if a database fails when it upgrades, we can do the upgrade SP content database and fix it. Durability and survivability, we talked about that. It just doesn't crash as much. The SQL timeouts were taken out. Upgrades will not be allowed if all the server farms don't have the same binaries installed. So in SharePoint 2007, if you install a patch, so when you install the patch, if you've got multiple machines in your farm, you have to install it, and then you run the configuration wizard to kind of finalize it. You can have, that will run if the machines in your farm aren't all at the same level. So in the last week, I had a customer who had some problems with their SharePoint 2007 farm, went into central admin, servers in this farm, and there were different build numbers for all their different servers. I'm like, I don't know everything, but that looks like a problem. Because this will work. You can have different machines at different builds. SharePoint 2010 doesn't let you do that. So if you try to do an in-place upgrade or patching or anything like that, if you try to run that configuration wizard screen, it's going to check all the servers in your farm, see what build number they're at, and if they're not all at the same build number, it's not going to let you run the configuration wizard. It's going to tell you, this machine's missing this patch, this machine's missing this patch, and it's going to give you a link to where that patch is so you can download it. So if one of your coworkers put a patch on that you don't know about, you've got a link where you can go grab it. So that's a big improvement. So we talked about most of that. The quota handling and the locked site collection thing is a good one. In previous upgrades, if a site collection was locked, you couldn't upgrade it because it was locked. SharePoint 2010 is smart enough to realize that it can just unlock it, upgrade it, relock it. And then the quota is the same thing. If we're close to going over the quota, it can upgrade it, let you go a little bit over your quota, but it's not going to let that stop you. So we talked a little bit about this. This is mostly for our developer friends, gentlemen sitting in the front there, that are writing features, so you can bring that in. We can run V3 features. We can change them on the fly so that 2010 can understand them so they can coexist. A good article in the magazine this month about that. The thing at the bottom, you have to do an IIS reset. All that feature information is cached, so if you change those things, you need to do an IIS reset for it to work. So a lot of people, we get the question a lot, how long is the upgrade going to take? You know, that's like that classic question, how long is a string? It just matters. So here are some of the things to consider when you're planning your upgrade. The number of site collections you have, obviously, more site collections, the longer the upgrade is going to take. Number of webs, number of lists, all that kind of stuff. Document versions is an interesting one. So in SharePoint 2007, your current version of your document is stored in one table. The previous versions of the document are stored in another table. So that was done for some very specific reasons, but what they found out was it made versioning slow, because every time somebody uploaded a version, the current one had to be copied to one table, and then the new one had to be copied to the other table. Didn't work out very well. So in 2010, all of the versions are in the same table, but that means when you do an upgrade, they all have to be copied into that table. So if you've got a lot of document versions, those have to get copied into that other table. It makes the upgrade take a while. And then how big they are obviously figures into that. So that's one of those things when we bring this up because somebody can look at the size of a database and say, you know, how long is this going to take? I've got a 20 gig database. Well, it matters if you've got 20 gig of, you know, big files, or if you've got 20 gig of a lot of little files, or if you've got a 20 gig of a few little files, but with a lot of versions. So we've got a lot of I/O, stuff's being copied over. It really, really depends. So the thing, we've kind of talked about how easy this upgrade is going to be for you. Hopefully we've got you feeling pretty confident about the upgrade to 2010. But I don't want you to get too confident. So one thing that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about, but as our demonstrations certainly attest to, we need to test. You need to test a lot. And so the whole question of how long will this upgrade last, my answer to that's going to be, well, we're going to test it. We're going to take some of your content databases, we're going to attach them to a 2010 farm, and we're going to see how long it takes. So that's test, test, test. Again, we haven't had time to really drill into that, but that's the key to a successful upgrade. So hardware-wise, what can you do to make things go faster? Everything's in SQL. So you want to have the best SQL backend you can have. You want a lot of disk IOs a second. You want to have your databases laid out well. You want to have your logs on one set of spindles, your database files on another set of spindles. If you can, put tempdb on a third set of spindles because a lot of stuff gets queued there. Watch your memory. Network. Everybody in this room should have at least gigabit between their web front ends and their SQL boxes. So make sure you've got all that. Sir, which question? A lot of what? Log file growth. Okay. So his question was, there a lot of log file growth? Absolutely. Because especially if you're doing the thing with the versions. So log files don't have a lot of time to get into SQL theory, but essentially everything happens in your log file before it happens in your database. Who here's had a log file fill up a drive and take a server down? Yeah, we got a few people that aren't telling the truth because everybody's hand isn't up. So absolutely, and that was one of the things that would kill 2003 to 2007 upgrades was hard drives filling up because transaction logs would chew up every little nook and cranny. So be aware of your log file usage. If you need to put your databases in simple recovery mode, something like that, which makes sense. Full recovery mode lets you do point-in-time recoveries, things like that, mirroring. But if you're in the middle of upgrading a database, you darn well better have a couple of good backups of it anyway, and you're not going to need to roll back to the middle of an upgrade somewhere. So you can probably put your databases in the simple recovery model before upgrade, and that's going to keep those log files from getting big. You want to jump back in, or? Okay.
Not particularly.
Fair enough.
So the funny thing about that, right? So, everybody's thinking you should practice your demos ahead of time.
Well, we
I
did.
have literally done this demo about 25 times. I've done it on this same VM, this same right here, 4 times in the last 2 weeks.
Twice yesterday.
So,
Yeah.
it's no excuse. I still apologize, but
Yeah.
the good thing is, see the URL at the bottom there? So this is that new, what we call it internally, it was called Ignite training. It's what we use to train like MCS and stuff. Kind of the kickoff point for MCS training. We had a big part of that. So what they've done is they've made those, there's like 19 hours of IT Pro stuff out there. There is 4 hours of yours truly talking about upgrade. In there, I do that demo on that VM in that thing. So it's all recorded, so it's out there, but that's the
It was all photoshopped, all done in the studio. No, it's we really did. We tested this. We were playing with it this morning, and it worked there too. So a couple more points. Actually, we want to make sure we have enough time to give away that last book. So we got 4 minutes. Okay. So these are just some key points that we wanted to make sure. We've talked about every one of these before, but we wanted to get them on one slide. You need to be at Service Pack 2 or later. One thing, you can't upgrade a trial SKU of SharePoint 2007. So there's some weird things, but the thing to keep in mind is your SKUs got to match between 2007 and 2010. Another fun thing that I discovered when I was writing the upgrade chapter for that book is I had a trial version of 2007 I was trying to do an in-place upgrade on, and it wouldn't upgrade because it was a trial.
The other is true also. If you have a licensed 2007 and you try and upgrade it, you can't upgrade it to a 2010 trial. So if you don't have your real 2010 key, you have same type of
Yep. If you're using forms-based authentication in SharePoint 2007, first, my condolences. Second, FBA, when it goes into SharePoint 2010, it now leverages claims. Holy crud, my condolences. So be ready for that. And if it hasn't happened already, Rick Taylor's doing a talk on claims this week, so you should check that out. SDS ADM, pre-upgrade check, run it early, run it often. Like the slide says, do some spring cleaning now. If you've got stale site collections, do you really need to upgrade crap? If you've got stale site collections you don't need anymore, get rid of them before the upgrade. Excessive document versions, those crazy end users and their documents and their versions, if you can clean some of that out, do that. One thing that we've seen a lot of people doing is reorganizing site collections, specifically into their own databases so that they can stage their content database attach methods. And so I've got a really spectacular blog post on an STS ADM command called merge content DBs, which ironically seems to only ever be used to split content DBs. But essentially it lets you take a site collection and move it to a different content database on the SQL side. So it's a lot easier than backup, delete, restore, pray, all that kind of stuff. So that we're finding that to be a very useful upgrade tool because people are able to move their 2007 site collections into content databases before they upgrade so they can take advantage of some of these staging things. And then if you haven't gotten enough of Shane's voice, you can listen to those things. Oh, the branding stuff. So themes in SharePoint 2007, well, let me take this back. I've got good news and bad news. In SharePoint 2010, themes are much better. Has anybody tried to create a custom theme in 2007? It's horrible. You're copying files and renaming stuff. In 2010, it's all better. The bad news is your SharePoint 2007 themes won't upgrade. So.
It worked.
That's 2007.
Yes, so watch this. Site actions, visual upgrade.
I'm not impressed yet. Yeah.
Preview.
The lime green's a nice touch, though.
Thank you. It's my favorite color.
He did it. He did it.
All right, so we're going to go a minute over. Don't tell anybody. So what I wanted to show you real quick, so I'm going to go in here to my old management shell. Okay, so for example, right, so if we wanted to, let's go back to my team site real quick. So you go on your team site, and you're like, hey, we're going to take this guy, and he's already been done to the visuals. Let's see what visual upgrade option there.
You committed it.
Good, so I committed this one. So if you go into site action, site setting, or for this web, title, description, icon, the visual upgrade piece is gone. What this tells me is that I've already committed this to the V4 visuals. So a lot of people tell you you're stuck forever. You can't go back.
Lies. All lies.
People don't like you. They lie to you a lot. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is a little PowerShell. So first thing I'm going to do is create a variable. I'm going to call it TechEd because that seems to be my variable today. So I'm going to do a get SP web for HTTP 2010 server A / team site.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, you can see it. We can't. It's great. Okay, so I got that web into a variable in PowerShell, right? So all you got to do now is I'm going to say, all right, my friend TechHead, I'm going to do a .UI version, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to set you back to 3.
This many.
Okay, I've set that property in the variable, so what do you got to do? You got to rewrite the variable back to SharePoint. You got to tell it you did it. So I'm going to do update like that. Now if we go back over here to our little team web, we'll say refresh this page. It's back to the V3 visuals.
They said it couldn't be done.
Now notice though, I still don't have the option for changing it back to V4, right? I've left that out. So go back to PowerShell again, and now you're going to do .teched.ui version configuration enabled equals $true. We're going to write that back.
Oh, I can't wait to see what happens.
You guys are smart. You know what happens. It blew
I knew
minds.
that was going to happen.
So now that is there. Right? So now that you know that simple trick, well, what if you want to do the whole site collection in one fell swoop? You guys are pretty smart, right? You know PowerShell because you're learning PowerShell.
Some of them. That developer guy, go either way.
All
Thanks
right.
for pointing yourself out early, too, because that made my work a lot easier.
All right, so 2010 server A, right? So we'll get the site collection, pipe that over here and say for each object. We're going to jump in the little tilde. We're going to say take the guy in the pipe. So the little, oh wait, I didn't do the get SP web, did I? I did not. Get-SP web. Todd, you're supposed to catch that stuff.
I caught it. I wasn't going to say anything, but I caught it.
So site collection, so give me the site collection, give me each web in there, and for each web in there, we're just going to do the same thing. So .UI version equals 4.
This many.
Semicolon. Same thing, underscore here, .UI version configuration enabled. You like how I have to spell things out?
His lips move when he reads, too. It's the most adorable thing.
Equals true. Oh, no, sorry, equals false. And then finally, take our little variable and .update. Boom, boom. Close this out. So that says, hey, there's more webs in there than 20. That's the automatic SharePoint magic filtering to keep me from doing anything too big. So we're going to say -limit all. We're done.
So what do we think? Do we think it's going to be 2010 when he gets done here?
They're expecting a blue screen. So there you go. It did the whole site collection.
Well, that one was already 2010, so go to your
There
team
you go.
site.
How about your blank site? He's 2010.
So that's that thing where you can tell people you have to have it done by a certain date, or I'm going to whip out the PowerShell. I'm going to make it happen.
So there you go. That's it. You got it. You guys are ready to do upgrades.
Okay. Go to the slide deck. So we got a couple things left. Some resources. We're going to be giving a book away, so if you walk out now, you're going to miss out on the book.
They don't care.
Yeah, fill out your evaluations. They're giving free stuff away. Yeah, they're still leaving. Didn't slow them down at all. One more slide. One more slide. Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. So Microsoft's giving away a copy of Office every day and an Xbox at the end of the week. They've got these little tags everywhere. Every one of these you scan puts you in for a drawing. So we've all got ours. I think that's Shane. I've got mine on my name tag. Every one of those you scan, you're put into a contest for Office and Xbox. But for more immediate gratification, Shane, whip out the coin.
All right, let's play heads or tails so we can get out of here, folks.
Fill out your evaluations. Thanks, everybody. Stick around for a book. We're going to give one away right now.